Hello from the Channel studio in London and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world. I'm Tenyola Oyetayo. On the program this week, Displaced Gazan residents celebrate Ramadan in the shadow of war, plus Sudanese lament high cost of food during Ramadan as war continues. Palestinians are observing Ramadan amid the backdrop of stalled ceasefire negotiations, escalating hunger, and the ongoing devastation wrought by Israel's 6-month-old offensive on Gaza. The holy month, typically a time of communal joy and reflection, is overshadowed by the grim reality of a conflict that has reportedly claimed over 31,000 Palestinian lives. It's a very different Ramadan this year for Palestinians. In occupied East Jerusalem, worshippers were allowed in to pray at Al-Aqsa Mosque after clashes with Israeli forces the previous night.
Ramadan this year is different, as this year witnesses a big event that all people grapple with in Gaza. Because of the war, people are very sad. Unlike in other years, people are starving in Gaza and in need of help. The holy month, typically a time of communal joy and reflection, is overshadowed by the grim reality of the conflict. Around the narrow streets of the old city of Jerusalem, the usual Ramadan decorations have not been put up this year.
Always, every year, we are make sweets about Ramadan, and we welcome the people and make a lot of meals inside the houses and in the Aqsa Mosque. But this year we are very sad because in Gaza Strip situation against people, against girls, against children, they are all killed a lot of time and a lot of people killed from Israeli military forces. For that we are very sad.
And in Gaza, thousands of displaced Palestinians now live in camps like this one in the southern city of Rafah. Many parents here are putting on a brave face for their children so they can feel the joy of Ramadan.
I live with my family in this tent where we will be observing the holy month of Ramadan by fasting and praying. I made these decorations to make the children happy because they had seen enough horrors during this war. We were displaced in the middle of the war. Hopefully it'll be better here so we can spend Ramadan in peace, or we will return to Gaza, God willing.
The United Nations has declared a humanitarian crisis across the Strip, with food, medicine, and supply shortages causing the prices of goods to skyrocket. Prior to October the 7th, Rafah was home to around 275,000 people. However, there are now 1.5 million Palestinians in the area after Israeli forces ordered civilians to move to the south at the beginning of the war.
Last Ramadan, everything was available, all goods and products were available to people. But Ramadan this year, the siege and the war have made things difficult. There's a lack of goods entering Gaza, and there's a significant shortage of money and job opportunities for the residents. People are suffering from the current economic situation and the rising prices.
We are striving to mark the holy month of Ramadan with all its blessings, but the overall situation is very difficult for us. We try our best to bring joy to the hearts of the children because they are not to blame for what is happening. A child wakes up from sleep and asks you, "Am I okay? Is there any shellings?" But we try our best to distract them from what is happening. As for us, our situation is extremely difficult in displacement due to the overwhelming number of people and the high cost of living. Everything is expensive and there is no money.
With the latest ceasefire talks stalled, the first day of Ramadan saw an airstrike near Rafah. The United Nations Secretary-General marked the start of the Muslim holy month by reiterating his call for an end to Israel's war on Gaza and warning against a ground invasion of Rafah.
Today marks the start of the holy month of Ramadan, a period when Muslims around the world celebrate and spread the values of peace, reconciliation, and solidarity. Yet, even though Ramadan has begun, the killing, bombing, and bloodshed continue in Gaza. We recently entered the 6 months since the Hamas terror attacks in Israel and the catastrophic Israel onslaught in Gaza began. My strongest appeal today is to honor the spirit of Ramadan by silencing the guns and removing all obstacles to ensure the delivery of life-saving aid at the speed and massive scale required. At the same time, and in the Ramadan spirit of compassion, I call for the immediate release of all hostages. The eyes of the world are watching. The eyes of history are watching. We cannot look away. We must act to avoid more preventable death. We have witnessed months after months of civilian killing and destruction at a level that is unprecedented in all my years as Secretary General. Meanwhile, life-saving relief for Palestinians in Gaza is coming in trickles, if it comes at all. International humanitarian law lies in tatters, and the threatened Israeli assault on Rafah could plummet the people of Gaza into an even deeper circle of hell.
The UN chief's remarks came a day after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed that a planned ground assault on Rafah would go forward, a pledge he made shortly after US President Joe Biden described an invasion of the overcrowded city as a red line. This conflict in Gaza began after thousands of Hamas fighters stormed into Israel on October the 7th, killing some 1,200 people. But Israel's relentless bombardment of the enclave has drawn increasing alarm across the world. The growing risk of famine is threatened to add to a death toll that has already, according to Gaza health authorities, passed 31,000. And over in Sudan, after nearly a year of fighting between the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces, many are struggling to afford basic commodities as Ramadan commences. According to the World Food Programme, 25 million people affected by the war don't know where their next meal is coming from. The UN had urged for a ceasefire over Ramadan in order to facilitate aid for those in need. Of the Rapid Support Forces, residents in Port Sudan struggle to afford food during Ramadan. Ramadan regularly sees price increases in Port Sudan due to supply issues, but this year, these have been exacerbated by the ongoing conflict. The war in the country, which began in April 2023, has caused severe disruption to imports from neighboring countries and supply chains, while many domestic factories have been destroyed.
The prices are high and the market suffers shortages of commodities. Our prices fluctuate because we sell goods with profit margins between £200 and £300. There are many people with no goods. The market has run out of goods and the essentials are no longer available.
We came to Port Sudan, but we did not find any support. We suffered with the high rents and the soaring prices for everything. We have no money to buy food and drinks for Ramadan, and the prices are skyrocketing. A small box of normal dates, the price used to be £2. Now it's risen to 4. The prices are soaring and we are exhausted. We do not know what is happening. We just want to go back to our city.
Any hopes of a ceasefire in Sudan were once again shattered on Monday after the army said they're not going to approve a Ramadan truce unless the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, which they are fighting, withdraw from key provinces which they've now taken control of. The UN Security Council approved a draft resolution for an immediate ceasefire in Sudan on Sunday. 13 nations of the 15-member council approved that vote, and only Russia and China abstained.
We urge the Sudanese Armed Forces and Rapid Support Forces to act on this united international call for peace and to silence the guns. We further urge the warring parties to build trust and seek a sustainable resolution to the conflict through dialogue.
It is important this Council has spoken with one voice to condemn the violence, demand a ceasefire, and call on the parties to ensure removal of obstructions to the provision of critical humanitarian assistance. We acknowledge this week's announcement that the Sudanese government has agreed to one cross-border access route by land from northern Chad and access by air, but this is insufficient. Addressing the dire humanitarian needs of all Sudanese requires unhindered cross-line and cross-border access from multiple points of entry to the most devastated areas of Sudan.
The UN chief has repeatedly pushed for a ceasefire, warning that the country's humanitarian crisis is reaching colossal proportions.
The conflict has taken a devastating toll on the people of Sudan, imperiling the unity of the country. There is now a serious risk that the conflict could ignite regional instability of dramatic proportions from the Sahel to the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea. We are deeply alarmed by calls for arming civilians and popular mobilization activities in various states. Armed groups are entering the fray in Darfur and South Kordofan. All these dangerous developments are pouring fuel on the fire for an even more serious fragmentation of the country, a deepening of intra- and intercommunal tensions, and more ethnic violence. It is time to silence the guns and raise the volume for peace. The humanitarian crisis in Sudan is reaching colossal proportions. Fully half the population, some 25 million people, need life-saving assistance. Over 14,000 people have been killed, although that number is likely far higher. Sudan is now home to the world's largest international displacement crisis, with 6.3 million people seeking safety within the country since the beginning of the conflict, and another 1.7 million people have fled to neighboring countries. Some 18 million people are acutely food insecure. This is the highest number ever recorded during a harvest season, yet numbers are expected to surge even higher in the coming months. We are already receiving reports of children dying from malnutrition.
The war between Sudan's army and the RSF erupted in mid-April 2023, amid tensions over a plan for transition to civilian rule. The two factions staged a coup in 2021 that derailed a previous transition from the 2019 overthrow of former leader Omar al-Bashir. The army has been on the back foot militarily for much of the conflict. The RSF occupied large parts of the capital in the first days of fighting. The UN says nearly 25 million people, half of Sudan's population, need aid. Some 8 million have fled their homes, and hunger
is rising. Thanks for staying with us on the programme. The United Nations refugee chief has raised a new alert over 780,000 displaced people in Mozambique, the vast majority of them because of a 7-year insurgency that has thrown the north of the country into turmoil. The situation has forced around 1.3 million people to flee their homes in Cabo Delgado province since 2017.
In Mozambique's northern Cabo Delgado province, every day is a fight for survival. For the past 7 years, people have endured violent attacks and witnessed their loved ones being killed and their homes and businesses burned to the ground. The country has been plagued in recent years by humanitarian crises linked to violence from non-state armed groups and the adverse impacts of climate change. It currently hosts around 700,000 internally displaced people, as well as hundreds of thousands of returnees who require assistance.
While we still have 700,000 IDPs around the north and parts of central Mozambique, 600,000 displaced persons have actually gone home in the last 1 to 2 years. That's a big deal. That's a vote for peace. That's a sense of confidence that we are turning a corner in Mozambique. And so, whilst we're here to learn how to better support displaced people in their displacement today, we're also here to learn how to accompany these hundreds of thousands of people who are heading home, who need to be supported.
Mozambique is a pilot country under the UN Secretary-General's Action Agenda on Internal Displacement, an effort to overhaul how the UN system is responding to protracted displacement. At the height of the conflict in 2021 and 2022, over 1 million people were displaced in the province following attacks by extremists since 2017.
It's not a simple situation because you still have humanitarian challenges, people being displaced by recent insecurity, but you need and we must invest more and more in solutions, in particular in the return of people to their homes, but we must invest in making these solutions sustainable. And therefore, the key issues here are food security, are the restoration of public services. UNHCR is involved in this complex interagency plan in support of the government.
Over 632,000 people have returned to their communities but now face the challenges of rebuilding destroyed homes and access to livelihoods.
In addition to people displaced by conflict, like here in Cabo Delgado, in the north of the country, in more central parts of the country, you have many people that are displaced periodically by catastrophic natural disasters as a result, clearly, of climate change. So interventions to solve displacement need to look at all contexts, need to look at a more conflict context where security is perhaps the biggest necessity, and the climate context where climate action is the biggest necessity.
Providing long-term assistance to internally displaced people has been a major challenge, with many camps being overcrowded. The UNHCR operation has been chronically underfunded. In 2024, the UN body says it requires $49.3 million. So far, it is only 17% funded.
Botswana has taken the lead in rallying support from Southern African Development Community countries to challenge Europe's proposed ban on the import of wildlife trophies. This united front highlights the role of trophy hunting in conservation and local economies across the region. The bill, introduced in the United Kingdom Parliament in 2022, aims to outlaw the import of hunting trophies into the United Kingdom. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Somosa, reports from Botswana.
Botswana, alongside nations such as Zimbabwe, South Africa, Namibia and Zambia, is voicing strong opposition to European efforts to prohibit the importation of wildlife trophies. These countries argue that the ban could severely impact their wildlife management strategies.
There's a ton of academic evidence out there that is readily available and has been given to them that has been ignored. Totally. So yes, I think the private members bill as it stands now is misinformed. It's unfit for purpose, and it lacks the basic foundations of any consultation.
What we have recognized in science is that government protected areas are nowhere near big enough to effectively conserve African wildlife. We need these wildlife management areas around these protected areas and these community areas and community conservancies and things. And so the future of conservation is actually, what the West doesn't realize, is through community conservation, because it's the communities. If we can effectively develop community conservation, we're effectively increasing the area through which wildlife can benefit and move and the habitats available for wildlife.
Some say the proposed European ban highlights a complex interplay between conservation efforts and economic realities in southern Africa.
The challenge we have is there's a lot of misunderstanding around hunting and sustainable use and how it contributes to people's livelihoods, how it mitigates conflict and how it benefits conservation. I think you heard earlier today there's a lot of misconception about hunting. Hunting and poaching is apparently the same, which is completely different. One is legal, one is illegal, one is controlled, one is indiscriminate.
Community members say the ban will have a knock-on effect on the local economy.
Banning hunting, truly speaking, is going to kill us, because we are depending much on this thing. And the livelihood of the people of our area have changed a lot. So there will be no life anymore.
The debate continues as both sides weigh the ethical, ecological and economic ramifications of trophy hunting and its regulations on the international scale.
And finally on the program, Tajikistan has seen strong economic growth and reduced poverty over the years. However, traditional gender roles persist, especially in agriculture. Marking a shift towards gender equality, women groups are now taking leadership roles in sustainable agriculture and food security. Take a look.
Deep inside Tajikistan's rural towns and villages, it's common to see women out working in the fields. With 20% of the workforce, predominantly men, working abroad, the country relies on women to carry out most of its agricultural labour. Despite the agriculture sector employing more than 60% of the country's population, ownership of land remains predominantly in the hands of men, with an estimated 80% of land holdings and local farm leadership attributed to them. However, thanks to a joint initiative funded by the UN's International Fund for Agricultural Development and the government of Tajikistan, more women are being empowered to make financial and operational decisions, thereby venturing into entrepreneurship. Halima, for instance, spearheads her village organisation in the Dusti town of southwest Tajikistan. Benefiting from the project's funding, the group collectively decided on investments, opting to acquire modern agricultural equipment to enhance farm efficiency and productivity.
We had a real challenge having access to tractors or finding tractor operators. Even if or when we could find a tractor in a neighboring community, they would come with delay.
The introduction of new machinery has significantly boosted their output of hay, rice and vegetables, streamlining field preparation and crop harvesting, particularly for potatoes and vegetables, which are then sold or rented out to others. Through the project, impoverished rural women across Tajikistan have been facilitated in establishing women's income-generating groups, enabling them to initiate income-generating ventures such as poultry farming and vegetable canning and pickling. These women have gained financial independence, actively making decisions that impact their lives and households.
As of June 2023, CAST project has supported around 180 village organizations, which means around 50,000, between 50 and 60,000 households, and more than 300,000 people have been supported by the project.
While rural women in Tajikistan still face challenges on the path to farm equality, initiatives like those in southwest Tajikistan are paving the way for progress.
And that's the programme today, but remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Teniola Uyitayo. Bye for now.